as an evangelical looking into the Catholic faith, there were miraculous things that I could not explain in my Protestant paradigm. Miracles associated with Mary, with the Eucharist, with the saints, apparitions, things that in my wheelhouse, in my paradigm, in my worldview as a Protestant Christian, where the saints were this thing I didn't understand, and Mary was just this virgin who lived and died a regular life apart from being the mother of God and all of that. The Eucharist was just bread and wine or grape juice. I could not understand these things as a Protestant Christian. They didn't make sense in my mind. So it was in hearing these miracle stories that I really had to pause and ponder and reconsider what I believed Christianity to be all about. I became Catholic, not just because of miracles like this, but in part because the testimony of miracles that I could not explain in my paradigm. So maybe my paradigm wasn't large enough, wasn't Catholic enough. This episode with Michael O'Neill, the miracle hunter, a guy who spent his life dedicated to finding and cataloging and bringing these miracles to us, is that exact kind of thing. Stories that I couldn't have explained as a Protestant Christian. I hope that you watch this video and dig deeply, think deeply about these miracles. Maybe they'll improve your faith as a Catholic. They'll bolster your faith, encourage you after hearing the miraculous. Maybe you're a Protestant, evangelical Christian watching this, and these stories, these incredible miracles will cause you to, like me, pause and go, okay, how do I explain this? And if I can't, what does that mean? Either way, I hope you love this conversation. One of my favorites. Please watch and enjoy. Hey friends, welcome back to the show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit the bell and subscribe to the channel. Do all those fun things you do on YouTube and share this video with some friends you might think might enjoy this. If you're listening on podcast, thank you. Make sure you subscribe. Follow this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave a rating or a review. Those help to push the podcast out to new people, and we'd love you to do that. And for others to hear more, to hear this awesome episode, because this is going to be a good one, guys. I am joined this week by Michael O'Neill. He is the Miracle Hunter. You can find his shows on EWTN. They're fantastic. He's the author of a number of books as well, including They Might Be Saints on the Path to Sainthood in America and Science and the Miraculous, How the Church Investigates the Supernatural, out from Tan Books. Michael, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show, and hello.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
I'm stoked to have you on the show, Michael. I love your stuff. I followed your work for a long time because this is really the exact kind of wheelhouse of what this show does in large part. So I'm a convert to the Catholic faith. Listeners to this show, many of them are looking into the Catholic faith, are new Catholics. And I got to tell you, Michael, for me as a non-Catholic Christian, I would encounter these strange things I could not explain in my paradigm. So, for example, like Mary in demonic possession cases, like why a priest calling on Mary would help, right? As Protestants, we could understand that because Mary wasn't who she is to us as Catholics, right? Miracles around the Eucharist or Marian apparitions or miracles the saints were able to somehow, quote unquote, perform. These things to the non-Catholic Christian is something that has to stop you in your tracks and make you either go, okay, well, how does that make sense? How is that possible? How is this guy cured of this thing? Because a saint, answered prayers. What does that mean? It makes you either, wrestle with that and perhaps, in my case, in the case of many who listen to this show and who've become Catholic as a result of thinking of these things, have to enlarge or change that paradigm and go, okay, so these things are happening. So how do I explain these things and still believe in the God that I understand as an evangelical Christian, right? So I love these kinds of things because they make you go, what? And stop and ask those questions. So thanks for bringing them to us, and so many in such a fantastic way. I want to ask you first of all how you got involved in doing this. How did you become the quote unquote miracle hunter? Because that's a crazy cool title. I mean, it's how did you stumble into this? What happened?
Yeah, I think I've been interested in miracles my whole life, and I think that I can probably attribute that to my mother. Probably growing up, I grew up in a Catholic household, and we knew a lot about the saints and Mary and all that sort of thing growing up. But miracles were always very important to us as a family, and I think that one of the family miracles we always talked about is the reversion of my grandmother. She had
Okay.
fallen away from the Catholic faith, and when my mother was young, and it was my mother prayed to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And you might look at me and say, hey, that guy doesn't have a drop of Mexican blood in his body. And it's true. But for whatever reason, in 1950s white America, my mother had a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And when her mother fell away from the Catholic faith, she kind of made a deal with God, as we believers like to do. And she said, God, if you bring my mother back to the faith someday, when I grow up, I'll become a school teacher. And on every December 12th, I will tell my children the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And if you bless me with any children, I will teach them the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe every December 12th, the story of the Tilma and those miracles. And so I wouldn't be telling the story if I didn't hear it all the time. And I still hear it every year to this day. My mother tells me the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe because her mother came roaring back to the Catholic faith, and she died a good Catholic. And so ever since, that story of Juan Diego and the Tilma and Our Lady of Guadalupe and the conversion of all the Aztecs and the whole deal, I heard it every single year. And for me, it became the second greatest story ever told. And so by the time I got to Stanford, and I took an archaeology class, and in that class, I wrote a paper on Our Lady of Guadalupe, because that was, the professor said, write about an artifact. And of course, that's my favorite artifact in the entire world. And when I studied that, I knew a little bit about miracles, and I knew about Guadalupe and Lourdes and Fatima, but I didn't know that there were thousands of miracles that the church has commented on. And I didn't know that the church actually said that they were worthy of belief. I thought it was kind of popular devotion or pious belief or tradition or whatever it was. But I didn't know the Catholic Church issued formal statements and, basically stuck its neck out there and said these crazy, miraculous things are really happening. So I said, someday when I grow old, I'm going to study miracles. And it was a few months later when I grew old, and I got the advice of Condoleezza Rice, who was a vice provost at Stanford at the time. And she gave this nugget of wisdom, which was become an expert in something. And she said that she was an expert in one tiny aspect of Czechoslovakian military history in 1 year. And she knew more about that one thing than anybody else on the entire planet. And I thought, that is so cool. What do I want to become the world's expert in? And, I thought back to my mother, and I thought back to all those miracle stories I had kind of uncovered, and my promise to myself to someday study this stuff. And I said, okay. And that's when I registered miraclehunter.com. It was probably 1999. It's lots of years ago, before people were really registering websites. But I did that, and I filled it up with stuff. Every miracle story I could come across that I could investigate a little bit, that I thought other people might care about. I loaded it to my site, and maybe there are 2,500 Marian apparitions on my site now, alleged and approved. And I secretly did that. And I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my girlfriend. I didn't tell my employer. I was an engineer. And so engineer by day, miracle hunter by night. And slowly, I started building up the site. And very secretly, people would email me, ask me questions about Medjugorje or whatever other thing. And I'd write back, but I'd always sign the emails MH, Miracle Hunter. I never put my name on the site or anything. But, then Dr. Oz and Megyn Kelly and National Geographic and History Channel and speaking engagements and book offers and all these other cool things that started happening to me. I started saying yes to them, and I had to get out there with my name. And so I eventually stopped formally being an engineer. Maybe I'm an engineer at heart always, but that's kind of how the whole thing launched. And Mary keeps opening these doors for me, and I keep walking through them. So maybe I'm not the world's expert yet, but I'm getting close. So that's that. Yeah.
Wow, Michael, that is an amazing origin story. I thought you were going to say, I took a course in high school and I enjoyed it. And that's amazing. Gosh, because you talk about, and I have had guests on the show for all different reasons and different things, and you talk about seeds that are planted and that come to fruition. I mean, what an amazing thing to think that your mom makes this promise, and then the seeds of her fulfilling that promise to God is sharing with you this miracle story, which then interests you in miracles, which then like I can go on and expand it, but you can see the beautiful way that thing grew, just the seeds of that. I think that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, but I feel like with my life, I'm continuing that promise that my mother made, and we're doing it together in a certain sort of way. So it's pretty great.
That's amazing, and to think of the thousands of people that you're impacting with the work that you do now that expands that. Those, gosh, the fruits of that labor is just amazing, Michael. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, I really, people ask me why I do this. Maybe my friends ask me, why be the miracle hunter? And I think I'm motivated by cracking the door open. I don't know who's going to necessarily get all the way to the Catholic Church as a result of miracles. Maybe some people do, but people like you maybe and others who are interested in Catholicism, or were interested in Catholicism, and they have these questions about what is that? What are these Marian apparitions? What is this stigmata or miracles of the saints or all these things? And what if they're real anyway? And that was my favorite part of the National Geographic story and map that I worked on. There's this map in the layout of that magazine where there's thousands of Marian apparition claims throughout history, and I just want people to look at that map and say, yeah, what if a couple of those 1,000 are true? That's something, right? So I just kind of want to crack the door open and make people learn, question and ask more, learn more. So
yeah, I love that.
That's my whole motivation.
That's a great point. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently who's evangelical, and I was talking about Lourdes, and I said, look, there's these so-and-so number of miracles. These are approved miracles or healings and whatnot. And I said, even if like a fraction of the approved ones that have been rigorously investigated, even if 2 of those, say 50 are legitimate, how do you explain those, right? If it's Mary answering those prayers, I mean, that's, yeah, I love that. I love that tact. I want to talk about how we talk about miracles. So there's all kind of different kinds of miracles, right? I've told them this story before, miracles that Padre Pio has done for me in this show to encourage me to keep on going, right? I had this lovely story of kind of praying, unsure if I should keep on podcasting a year into this thing. I'm now 4 years in, but a year in, I wasn't sure if I should keep on going. And so I said, Padre Pio, pray for me, ask the Lord to give me some consolation that I might know I should keep going in this. And I get an email, Michael, a minute later on my phone from this guy, a listener to the show, saying, I love your show. It's fantastic. Keep podcasting. And I laugh like, it's funny. Thank you, Padre Pio. But the guy signed the email, CEO of the National Padre Pio Center in America. And I love this story because I'm like, Padre Pio sent his CEO to encourage me to keep working on the podcast, which is a great connection.
Padre Pio is my favorite, so it doesn't surprise me.
One of mine too, Michael. But those aren't the kind of miracles that you investigate, right? The miracles that you deal with. I mean, maybe that is in the wheelhouse, but you deal with some crazier miracles that you hunt for. So what are the kind of the categories of miracles that you're typically looking at that go beyond something as I shouldn't say mundane. That's not mundane, Michael, but these are pretty cool miracles.
Yeah, no, I like to call them the capital M miracles versus the lowercase m miracles. Yeah. We all have these, lowercase ones where we're late for a meeting and we get 5 consecutive green traffic lights and get the traffic light miracle. And that's legitimate, right? I mean, that's a real thing. But I like to look at these capital M miracles. And in my book, Science and the Miraculous, I think I have a chapter dedicated to each of these very, major miracle types. We're talking about Marian apparitions. We're talking about the healing miracles attributable to the saints. We're talking about weeping statues and icons. We're talking about Eucharistic miracles. We're talking about the stigmata. These are the major categories of miracles that we see in our church. And there are other major ones. You can't get around the miracle of the sun at Fatima. That's the biggest one in modern times, you might say, with 70,000 people at the COVID area gathering for that last apparition of Our Lady of Fatima. I mean, that's a mega miracle. It doesn't fall into any of those categories. So, but those are the kind of the big ones that we see happening over and over and over again. Saint Januarius, that blood miracle, I'm sure you're familiar with that. Every September 19th, you get the blood of a 3rd century martyr, which is, hard as a rock, and then it liquefies, and then the crowd goes wild, and they go wild because it's a strange, freaky thing that they have in Naples, but also because it means there won't be Mount Vesuvius blowing up, or an earthquake, or a natural disaster of some sort, or coronavirus, or whatever reason it doesn't liquefy that year. So it's a pretty fun place to be. Go for the pizza, but stay for St. Januarius. But it's pretty great. Catholic Church is chock full of all these capital M miracles, and I love to write these episodes for EWTN and talk about them on my radio show. And it's a blessing to get to bring these stories that a lot of people don't know about to the world.
Yeah, it's so fun. I often describe these kind of things to listeners and guests and to friends and family as kind of that weird aunt, right? The weird aunt at Christmas that you don't want your girlfriend to meet when she first comes to meet your family. She'll say weird things and she'll kind of freak you out. So you want to kind of keep her to the side until your girlfriend kind of knows the family and meets the family and gets to know everybody. And then you can bring the weird aunt out and she'll say all these crazy things but the girlfriend's more acclimatized to your family and maybe likes you a bit more to hear those things. And I always think of these kind of things like, stigmata, Eucharistic miracles, these weeping statues. These are the weird aunt things of the Catholic faith, which are wonderful, and we love that aunt, but they're weird sometimes, right? They're kind of freaky, and you hear those things, and you might kind of go as an outsider, like, who are these people? Like, what's going on here, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I know it's weird, and I was a respectable engineer at some point in my life, but now I'm doing this. And I think, my friends from Stanford, they see me doing some of this stuff, and they probably say, wow, that guy really, really went wild with what he's doing. But hopefully I can lend a little bit of credibility to these things, that Catholics believe in these things, or they acknowledge this phenomenon has happened throughout history. And, hopefully, I could shed some credible light on some of these things, because they are very interesting. And if they are true, they're worth looking at, right?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, right? So, in your latest book in particular, you're looking at, and I want to ask you this question next, how the church actually investigates these kind of miracles, because it's not as if the church just wide open, these are all okay and fine, like you believe this and this is fine, we'll all say that's great, right? The superstitious kind of I almost said stigmata, the superstitious kind of like idea that the church is attached to, that the people see the church as this superstitious kind of institution sometimes, just accepting these miracles kind of with no discernment whatsoever. That's not how the church understands miracles. It's a rigorous process which you detail. So I wonder if you can give us a bit of a snapshot of how the church looks at miracles before they can say, hey, yeah, this I think is a miracle. It's a pretty intense process, right?
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying out of the gate that a couple of things. One is that when it comes to miracles, Catholics are not obliged to believe in anything outside the Gospels. Yeah. So any of these modern day miracles that happen after the death of St. John are completely optional. If they help our faith, if they help us grow closer to Christ, we can embrace them, we can celebrate them, we can really get into them if it helps us. But if we find them weird or distracting or not authentic or, confusing or whatever you want to say, that if they're not good for your faith, we can just leave them alone and just say that's fine and that's for everyone else, but not for me. And even when the church judges a miracle, it says it's worthy of belief. It never says it must be believed or else, it's not a de fide thing. So the church handles that really well in that sense. And so, you can even talk about the most famous cases of all time at Fatima. You could say, oh, those children were just making it up. And that wasn't a real vision of Mary, or that was something else. You could say that and you'd be a good Catholic if you believe that. Or Lourdes, you could say those thousands of cures that have been claimed there, and the many that have been validated. Science doesn't know what it doesn't know yet. So, I don't believe in those medical healings. You could say that, and that would be okay. Or Guadalupe, you could say that kind of looks like a painting to me. I don't really think that's a miraculously emblazoned image on the tomb of Juan Diego. You'd be okay if you said that, but send me an email if you have any of those opinions. Those are three of our best ones. But so yeah, I think it's pretty amazing. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that the church isn't interested in finding and promoting miracles. I think that Protestants and otherwise, and some people say, look at those Catholics, they're talking about miracles, they're proving miracles, they're running out of members, they need people to come back into the pews and buy rosary beads. That's what they're doing, trying to make money or trying to keep their faith alive. No, I don't think so, especially in modern times. When a bishop experiences someone in his diocese claiming a vision of Mary, or a window with an image of Mary, or whatever the thing is that the crowds are gathering, he's probably saying, "Oh no, I don't want this." And you can even see in the cases of the very highly approved Marian apparitions in history, you see the local bishop basically every time saying, find me a sign, or I don't really believe this. Juan Diego, go find a sign to prove this is real, because I don't believe this. And so the bishop is always discouraging miracles and doesn't want to deal with miracles. So it's one of the worst things that he has to deal with on a large scale when miracles are claimed in his diocese. So the church really isn't out there to promote miracles. So that's worth saying. But all those things aside, your question was, how does the church approve miracles? And so every miracle type has a different approval process. And in the book, Science and the Miraculous, I detail kind of the scientific inquiry when it comes to stigmata. For example, there are certain types of wounds that doctors look at. They look for, psychological issues in cases of Marian apparitions, weeping statues and formation of images. They might do some testing to make sure there's no internal ductwork or a leaky pipe or a leaky ceiling or anything like that. They're always trying to rule out hoaxes and these things, but probably the most detailed process is in healing miracles used in canonization. So, we might think that anytime there's a healing miracle, they might, your parish priest might hop on the phone and call the bishop, and then the bishop might pick up his red phone and call the Pope, who picks up his phone. And we say, we've got a hot one, we got a miracle, and we're going to send in the miracle hunters. Well, it doesn't work like that at all. And I wish it did. I'd love to be on that team, but there's no such team. So I think that, they're healing miracles. They have it must be and it's the same criteria, Lambertini criteria, named for Prospero Lambertini. He's an Italian cardinal born in the 1600s. And that criteria is still in use today at Lourdes, and also in the Congregation for the Cause of Saints, or the Dicastery now for the Cause of Saints. And so it must be a serious condition, not liable to go on its own. It must be an instantaneous, complete, and lasting cure. And there can be no medical treatment related to the cure. And there can no other crisis that precipitates the cure. So if you have one disease and a worse disease takes over, that doesn't count as a cure. Or you get hit by a car once you have cancer, it's that's not the thing. So so that's for healing miracles. And then it must be the intercession of just one saint, which to me is the hardest part. Right. I pray to all my friends, the saints, when I'm in trouble, hoping somebody up there picks up the phone. But, when it comes to canonization miracles, it's got to be one person that you pray to, one future saint, not Padre Pio and Saint Therese and all your favorites, and the future saint. The Pope would say, we're going to go with Padre Pio, not the might be saint. So, so that's a really tricky aspect as well. But when you talk about Marian apparitions, there's this 1978 document, this Norms of the Congregation for Proceeding and Judging Alleged Private Revelations and Apparitions, that came out sub secreto, secretly in Latin, to all the bishops of the world. And it's the rule book that the church uses, and it's never been updated, it's never been replaced. And that talks about all the criteria of how a Marian apparition is to be judged. And they talk about the visionary. They must have good moral qualities. There must be evidence that there's a supernatural character to the event. There can be no money making, seeking of fame, with psychological issues. There's a whole list of criteria that document lists. And it's now been leaked to the world. All documents get leaked to the world, so you can go to miraclehunter.com to read that one now. But so they used that document, and even in the 1859 apparitions of Our Lady of Good Help in Champion, Wisconsin, which is the one and only case in the United States, which was approved on December 8th in 2010 by Bishop David L. Ricken from the Diocese of Green Bay. If you read his statement, he's read that 1978 document, because he says line by line, all the criteria are met in order to say that it is worthy of belief in the supernatural character of those events. And that's the only time in the United States that's happened. So when we talk about numbers, we talk about one Marian apparition approved, and we talk about maybe 30 healing miracles in the history of the United States that have ever been used for canonization of saints. And there have been no miracles at Lourdes that have been recognized from the United States. So those are all the miracles that we've got here in the United States. So very long-winded answer to your question, but that's all I've got on that one.
Well, and it tells you just how rigorous the process is, that there's that few miracles kind of approved. And I guess even in spite of all of that process, you still you tell us that even in that case, we don't have to believe in those still. We can still choose not to believe in the miracles, even though there's obviously that much rigorous oversight and investigation going into the process of approving those. You can still say, no, I don't want to believe in those. So I guess the question then is, why? Why does the church investigate miracles? Why does it take this, approach to miracles so kind of careful in documenting this? And why does the church, I guess, why does it say you don't have to believe in these, but why does it say there are some you can believe in? Like what is the mind of the church when it comes to miracles, I guess, in the modern world, post-apostolic kind of age?
Yeah, it's a very, very big question, and I'll try to answer some of that. I think that, on a basic level, we all have a hunger for the supernatural, right? And I think that for all of us, we have ups and downs in our faith, and, miracle stories are important to all of us on some level. And if you talk about Christianity in general, you've got to believe in miracles, right? The incarnation and resurrection, the bookend miracles. If you don't believe in those, sign up for a different religion, because that's all we've got. That's what we've got. So, I think that why does the church go through the process of investigating miracles? Well, the history is that it didn't investigate miracles for a long time. And so we're talking about up until the 1500s, 1545 to be exact, the Catholic Church up until that point had no formal process. And so, I think it was just a local community, a local parish priest, maybe the bishop would come, maybe they'd pray about it, and they'd say, does this seem like a miracle? Yes, miracle. Kind of like they do with St. Januarius that I referenced before. There's never been any formal church investigation, but, when that blood liquefies on September 19th, you've got a guy with a white flag saying, Miracolo, miracolo, and then the bishop blesses it and they call it a miracle, but it's very informal in Naples there. So, but at the Council of Trent, they started with the investigation of miracles. And why did they do this? One of the reasons why is because there were so many miracles being claimed all around the world, and there was no formal process, so nobody to say this was legit, this wasn't. And you talk about specifically St. Bridget of Sweden. She's one of the great patrons of Europe and a great mystic. And she would have these visions, incredible visions that were in a wide variety of topics. And she'd have visions about things like when the Crusades should start and stop. So, she would say those in Swedish, and then in Latin, they'd be transcribed. And then the Pope would get those messages, and maybe he'd do something about them. And then other times she would talk about how to do your laundry well. Those would be other visions that would come to her, and those would be written down and disseminated. And so I think partly she precipitated the need for people to say, okay, what's the formal process? What's an approved miracle and what's not? And so the Council of Trent initially said the bishops were in charge of investigating miracles. And then later you have perhaps in 1917, they say the Vatican's in charge, and then it went back to the bishops. So it's kind of been a ping pong match back and forth, but it's a hot potato, really. Nobody wants it. I mean, when the Vatican was in charge of investigating miracles, they had so many miracles they didn't know what to do with. So they gave it back to the bishops. So Perhaps the reason why miracles are investigated is because they do happen, and the church has to figure out how to transmit that knowledge to the faithful and how to give the faithful guidance on what to do about these things, especially when it comes to private revelation. We can talk about healing miracles all we want, or stigmata all we want, or weeping statues all we want, but what happens when there is a vision of the Virgin Mary and she's something supposedly, and it needs to be figured out, does that match up to church teaching? You don't want the Bible, the magisterium, and this other, voice in the room of, what Catholics should believe. So they needed to come up with a way of judging those private revelations and having a way that the faithful could embrace them if they were worthy of embracing, but also shut them down if they were dangerous to questioning the teachings of the church. So that is the reason why there's both investigation and approval, but not the requirement of belief.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to know now for sure what this laundry hack is. Is this in a book somewhere?
Yeah, it'd be a pre-laundry machine. So I think it's not that useful these days. But it's pretty fun to know the history of some of these great people receiving visions throughout the ages.
That's awesome. And I guess interesting to me that miracles. So there's a stream of Protestantism that says miracles are done, right? This doesn't happen anymore, right? And I have friends in that kind of stream of Christianity that the miracles kind of ceased when the apostles died, because miracles existed for Christ to confirm who he was, that he was God. For the apostles to confirm, this church is what Christ has kind of established. And after that, miracles were not required anymore, and so they don't happen anymore in the same way. Now, we of course don't believe that, and you have a website full of miracles that are pretty awesome. That would probably put a quick end to your life's work, Michael. But does the church have say why miracles still happen today? Is there an easy way of explaining that? I can think of answers, right, to bolster our faith, to demonstrate the truth of the Catholic faith, to encourage more. I mean, I'm thinking of Our Lady of Guadalupe and the millions of people who came to faith through that miracle. Is there a way to understand what the church says, why these still happen around the world?
Yeah, I think that, like you say, there are cessationists who say, miracles have ceased, but we know that miracles do happen. I mean, it's a reality. We see the miracles, used in canonization causes. We see miracles, big and small, happening in our lives, and how they bolster our faith and they assure us that God is there as a loving Father. I think that. I think that for many people, they understand God through how he works in our world. And these are the very clear examples and ways. And when the church says it's worthy of belief, we have that extra layer of support and then confidence that God is working in our world. So, I think that we all benefit from miracles in one way or another, whether we're receiving miracles or we're hearing about them or we're praying for them. It's all part of the process, and it's all part of our faith. So I think it really enriches our faith to have miracles.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to dig into some if we can with you. I don't know if you have a favorite. Do you have a favorite category of miracles that contains some of your favorite miracles, or are you more a generalist, Michael?
Well, I have to say that, my website, miraclehunter.com, started out being a resource on Marian apparitions. And since those early days, I branched out, and now my site has all the stigmatics and all the healing miracles and all the incorruptible saints and Eucharistic miracles. It's got the whole deal. I'll answer it this way. I always love Marian apparitions. I think they're fascinating, that the Mother of God would walk amongst us. I think that's amazing. And I love that there's a sort of a cultural twist to all of it. Mary doesn't appear the same in any place. So I think that's pretty interesting. Healing miracles are universal. I was on the Dr. Oz show at some point, and the reason they had me on there rather than talking about the stigmata or something else is because everybody likes healing miracles, right? I mean, Protestants and otherwise, when you see a good healing miracle, you can ignore if there's a saint involved, but either way, people like that. But I have to admit that, especially in these years of Eucharistic revival, Eucharistic miracles are the most important miracle to talk about these days. And simply because there's some science there that can really validate these. And when it comes to miracles of all types, there are complications. They all require faith. We talk about Marian apparitions. We talk about it must be the reliable witness, the reliable testimony of a faithful visionary. Of course, in the case of Juan Diego in the tilma, that's a little bit different. We have a little bit of a proof positive with an object there. But everybody else, you have to rely on their testimony. And then you also have to talk about stigmata, for example. Some saints have, the wounds in their hands and some in their wrists, and some have 6 wounds. And Therese Newman had 60 lash marks on her back, and some have a crown of thorns, and some, are there for their whole life, and some just for some period of time. And there's a little bit of complication. Why does it work that way? Or you talk about incorruptible saints. Some are incorrupt for 50 years, some for hundreds of years. Some are partially incorrupt, and maybe you have a couple hundred saints out of 10,000 that are incorrupt. So, why the variability there? It's so you need a little faith. Miracles are complicated, and so I think that with all miracle types, you can say, why don't we just show these to our Protestant friends and get them all on board with the Catholic faith? But there's always a loophole. There's always a missing piece that you can always say, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. It all requires faith. With Eucharistic miracles, I think there's more scientific proof with those than any other type of miracle. And I understand why Protestants and others don't want to get on board with them, because if they are real, you got to become Catholic. You got to, there's no other choice. In these cases where true flesh and true blood are made manifest on a Eucharistic host, as validated by science. And what's so interesting is it's not a matter of somebody could have just snuck in to a tabernacle and dropped some drops of blood on it, and then they let them discover it, and they say, oh yeah, that's a miracle. When they on a microscopic level, the flesh and the bread are integrated in an absolutely inseparable way that's impossible to replicate with any human technology. I mean, this is alien or divine technology at best. So, I think it's mind-blowing, some of these Eucharistic miracles that have happened. And I don't know, it's so interesting that there's no DNA, in these samples, because if there were, and they were able to compare them, I think that'd be pretty interesting. But as of right now, the DNA does not. There's missing DNA in the Eucharistic miracle samples, which is kind of interesting in and of itself, since Jesus didn't have a human father, so that's pretty interesting as well. So anyway, but yeah, Eucharistic miracles are my favorite. I'm writing a new book about Eucharistic miracles for EWTN Publishing, and I've got the website eucharisticmiracles.com, so eventually I'll be loading that with more information. And of course, the Eucharistic Revival is something that our whole church needs, so I hope to be involved in a bigger way with that and spreading the word on Eucharistic miracles.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's so cool, because and you're right about the idea that you have to become Catholic. This is one of the big things that differentiates us from non-Catholic Christians in the most part. I mean, some Anglicans perhaps have a certain idea of this in a certain way, but uniquely Catholics, and I guess our Orthodox brothers and sisters, in a similar way, right? We believe that in communion, the wine and the bread become the flesh and blood of Christ in a miraculous way. Now, not that I can put that under a microscope and see flesh. The bread remains bread, but apart from the appearance, it is the body, blood, soul, divinity of Christ. We believe this as Catholic. We believe this because Christ tells us this, right? For good reason. The early church believed this too, is passed on. I mean, there's good reasons why we believe this. And so when there's times when that real presence becomes real, in the sense that we all of a sudden see human flesh or blood, right? That seems to be, miraculous confirmation that, yeah, you guys are on the right track here. God is saying, yeah, you're right. Here's a miracle to kind of, to underpin your belief here, right? And I love that you say it's either aliens or God, because of course it could be aliens too, but good reason to believe it's not. There's God doing this, and again, that's that paradigm kind of shifting thing. Okay, so why would God do that miracle, Michael, if he weren't affirming the Catholic belief in the real presence? Because that's obviously going to mislead people who see this and experience this, why would God permit Satan to do a miracle? Like, that makes no sense. Like, then you follow the logic out, it's God or it's aliens, okay, and that has to be a paradigm shift either way, right? Either way, I think. So those miracles, yeah, that's so interesting. Can we talk a bit more about, maybe, I don't know, you mentioned examples of the flesh and the bread being intertwined. You mentioned kind of missing DNA. I've heard things like there have been examples where it's the tissue that appears there is heart tissue under trauma. I've heard really cool things. I've also heard claims that in cases of blood, it's often the same kind of blood type or blood that somehow we can see is under stress. Like, again, there's leading to the claim that this has become Jesus, flesh and blood, the Jesus, from the cross, under trauma, under pain. I mean, is that true? Is what I've heard true? Is there good examples of these miracles happening?
Yeah, and I encourage you to look out for my book, which will be coming out next year.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be laying out all those details. But what you mentioned is all true. Is that on those Eucharistic miracle samples, they've found heart muscle, and striated or tortured heart muscle, to be specific. And when you talk about blood types on each of the Eucharistic miracle samples all around the world that they've examined, it's blood group AB. And you might say, is that a very common blood type? And no, that's very rare, except amongst Middle Eastern men. And then if you look on the Shroud of Turin, it's also blood group AB. Yeah. So I think that's mind blowing to me that there's that correspondence. And as science develops, I think we're going to see even more along these lines. But yeah, there's definitely a correspondence amongst these samples. It's absolutely amazing. There haven't been that many Eucharistic miracles, about 100 perhaps around the world. So, but the fact that these cases do match, again, like if the DNA was there, that would be, everybody would have to convert on the spot. If the case in India matched the case in Mexico, matched the case in Italy, but right now the DNA is missing, so that's interesting. But yeah, the blood type seems to correspond, and the blood and the heart muscle, and the correspondence with the Shroud of Turin. So, I think that. I don't know. The more that comes out about this stuff, I think is going to be really eye-opening for a lot of people. So it's just going to be a test of faith at some point.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and the fact that there's the correspondence, the fact that, like you said, you can't just sneak heart muscle into a host. I mean, for non-Catholic Christians listening, the host is often a fairly small sized thing. It's not like this thing you can just kind of manipulate and still manage to have that thing have any kind of form still, right? Be solid and be intact. Like you can't manipulate that very, very easily. And I mean, you can't really sneak somebody's. I mean, whose is it? For one thing, right? The heart muscle or the flesh or the blood. That's not easily snuck into, right? This is not an easy miracle to try and hoax. For one thing, I don't think. Right?
Yeah, and in the case specifically of the 1996 Buenos Aires miracle, which is truly remarkable, the scientist from New York who investigated it. He found white blood cells on it, which white blood cells should not be present. And I think, in a dead tissue sample, you will never find white blood cells.
Right.
And one of the comments was, in order to get this heart muscle, the person would have had to have been killed, or it would have killed them to get this sample from them. So, from that part of the heart. So, I don't know. All these things are pretty remarkable. I'll be excited to be working on this book and to get that out there, and hopefully that opens up a few eyes, because I think it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and in the year of course, in the time of Eucharistic revival, how important is that to bolster the faith and to encourage Catholics and non-Catholics to look into the faith and go, you know what, this is happening here. Like, what's going on? There's recently, like, right, in the news report of miraculous multiplying of a host, right? This is under investigation by the bishop, right? But these kinds of things are gosh, they're interesting to look at, especially when the evidence begins to pile up and begins to corroborate. Right, I'm a huge Shroud of Turin fan. One of the early episodes of this show 4 years ago, I had a shroud expert on the show talking about the Shroud of Turin, and that for me was a little, maybe a guilty pleasure of me to have her on the show to indulge myself, because I love it so much, and listeners, it turns out also love that too, and the correspondence, right? When those kind of things interact, and like the blood sample on the shroud matches the blood type of Eucharistic miracles, when the veil, right, matches some things on the shroud, like these things correspond, these different miraculous items correspond. I mean, it begins to paint this crazy narrative that, gosh, something bigger is at work here. Like maybe these Catholics have something going on, and I think that's gonna cause people, right, if we're thinking why miracles still happen today, to go, okay, we can't explain this. I gotta think more deeply with that. I gotta look more deeply. I can't just discount this religion as superstition when even science is showing me that there's something going on here, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, cracking the door open and saying, I can't just walk away. I've got to find out if there's something to it. So, I think there's a lot of potential with miracles to inspire people to learn more.
Yeah. Okay. Miraculous icons, images, weeping statues, and things. That's fringy, right? That's the kind of thing that you hear Jesus appearing in toast sometimes, right? Or like these things that I'm thinking of the Simpsons way back when would satirize these, would poke fun at these kind of things, right? The idea that, oh my gosh, I saw Jesus in a piece of toast and the way that it burned or something, right? The statue is crying here, but these things actually happen, Michael? Like these?
Yeah, I've had friends try to play a joke on me, burn my toast a certain way to see if I'll call the Vatican. But yeah, no, it's I think that there's a wide variety of things out there. Talk about the Virgin Mary toast, and strangely in that case, the woman from Florida, she saw toast and sold it on eBay, or saw the Mary on toast and then sold it to eBay or casino, I can't remember, and made $10,000. But as a result, she was introduced to a Catholic priest, and she ended up becoming Catholic as a result. So, God can work in mysterious ways, including toast. Yeah. But, I mean, these cases of a chiropoita or, pareidolia, where people see things in the clouds or in toast or whatever it is, people who are fans of Walt Disney see Mickey Mouse in the clouds, and Catholics see the Virgin Mary. So, our minds are preconditioned to look for patterns, of things that are familiar and pleasant to us. So, I definitely understand that science there, that these things aren't necessarily real miracles, but God works in mysterious ways for people. And, if things bring people to faith, who are we to discount them? But those are definitely not the types of miracles that I dig into.
But things like statues weeping. Do you deal with statues weeping? Because that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. And, there are cases from around the world, and I think Greece and Russia are famous for those. And, we even had a case here in the United States in Hobbs, New Mexico. I don't know if you're familiar with this one, but this was pre-pandemic. This was reported in the Washington Post. There's a church of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and with a bronze statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I actually went to Mexico and was in the foundry that made that statue. And I talked to the sculptor and creator of the statue, and they said that they produce hundreds or thousands of statues of similar style, different sizes, but it's the only one that's ever wept tears. They call her La Milagrosa, the miracle worker. And so, but yeah, this happened, I think, on 4 occasions in New Mexico, and you can go on YouTube, you can see it happening, and it's they captured it on film, and they got the tears from it, and the local bishop investigated and said no natural explanation. Of course, there are no messages associated with a weeping statue, but I don't know. I think on some level, if you've ever seen your own mother cry, you have to reflect on what you're doing wrong, to cause your mom to cry. So, they're complicated in their own way, but yeah. I think there's been some remarkable weeping statues in the United States. Rosa Mystica is a famous duplication of weeping statues around the world, and then also the Seton miracles on the East Coast. We've had some various cases here in the United States, but this is something that's happened worldwide. We don't always know why or what was happening. Some statues bleed. Some statues have human tears. Some have water. Some have oil. Why doesn't God just stick to just one substance? All miracles are complicated, as I like to say. They all require a little faith. So, but this stuff happens, and it's hard to ignore when you see the preponderance of claims. Even if a fraction of them are real, then we're still dealing with something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keep thinking that even if a fraction of any of these things are real, right? Even if one Eucharistic miracle is real or one statue is weeping, that's still a statue. That's still a Eucharistic miracle that's happened. And how do we have to explain that in some way? And I guess the question or pushback could be, well, science can't explain it yet, but it will in the future. This is something happening, not miraculous, just regular science, but rules we don't quite understand yet. I mean, you're an engineer, you're a man of science. How do you push back against that kind of agnostic approach? Like, we just don't understand it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with healing miracles, that's a legitimate comment because, can the mind heal the body, for example? Is that such a thing? And by the numbers, these healings are very small, especially even at Lourdes. You get so many millions of people going there, and then you have even if you have thousands of cures, by percentage, it's a small number. So what if these little blips are something else, and that's okay. I have no problem with things like placebo effect and other ways that healings can happen. But I think when you take miracles as a whole and these various categories of miracles and various styles of miracles and throughout history that they've happened, countries all over the world, even if you discount 99% of them, there's still a lot of things out there that you can't explain. And they don't just happen randomly. There's sort of answers to prayer, and they are things related to the saints and related to the Eucharist. So these all have connections to God. So it's hard to hand wave around all of them and say there's some kind of mysterious solution that we don't really know about.
Yeah. And of course, again, you can have miracles in other, I don't know, faith groups, other religions. It's a complicated question. I've heard people like Jamaican Catholic Answers tackle this before. And he'll say, yeah, that's possible. That God would provide miracles to other people in other places who wouldn't necessarily be Catholic. But there are undeniably Catholic miracles that are happening attached to saints, attached to the Eucharist, attached to these things that really require, that demand, some answers, or just to kind of ignore them, right? Or say, well, you don't understand yet. The science is beyond us. We'll get it someday, right? That's the element of faith there, right? That these things require a kind of answer. And the answer could be just agnostic. I don't know. I don't understand why this is happening, or it could be, okay, I'm gonna believe this is because this is the God of the Catholic faith doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that agnosticism is lazy on some level, and there's this whole thing that we can all kind of go to sleep at night, but then we're all gonna die. That's something that happens. There's something. There's an eternal reality that has to be grappled with for every person. So, being lazy isn't the answer in my book. For me, I've gone the opposite way of, I'm digging into it. I'm trying to get all the answers to all these crazy things and trying not to go to sleep on these things because, I don't want the lazy answer of saying, who knows? It might be, it might not be. I want to know, and for the things that I've seen, the things that I've experienced, the things that I've learned, I cannot not believe. I have to believe.
Yeah.
And so, and I have to share what I've learned. So that's what motivates me a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you two more questions, and the second one will be your favorite, maybe Marian apparition. Maybe maybe I already know the answer to this one. But before that, I want to ask you maybe your favorite miracle in general. Is there one that if you had to pick, this would be your favorite kind of miracle that you've investigated, that you've really enjoyed and just kind of stuck with you?
I'm going to give you the Padre Pio miracle because you're a
Okay.
Padre Pio
I
fan.
am, yeah.
But there's many healing miracles out there that are just incredible. People who have, on my radio show, I love being able, I interview all kinds of people, but my favorite guests are the people who have had these insane miracles. People who have been blind and they can see, or Robert Gutherman from Philadelphia, the boy who had an ear infection, the bones were eaten out of his ear, and they prayed to Catherine Drexel, and through her intercession, you know, not only does he get his hearing back, but the bones grow back in his ear. Pretty incredible. So I love talking to the real people who have had this stuff happen. And I think my favorite miracle story is that of Vera Calandra. She was this young girl who was born in this would be in the 1960s. And her mother, saw that she was sick and dying, and they went and saw all these doctors, and she didn't know what to do, and she thought her 2-year-old girl was going to die, and she talked to friends, and they said, there's this might be saint, or this future saint who lives in Italy. His name is Padre Pio. You should go see Padre Pio and see if he can cure your daughter. And so I think that she goes to the doctors and says to the doctors, I want to fly to Italy and I want to get blessed by this priest. And the doctors say, well, your daughter's going to die in the airplane if you do that. And they said, if you before you go, you need to have your daughter has to have a surgery, and her bladder needs to be removed. I don't know the science of that, why that was important, but so she was hooked up to these tubes with no bladder, and her mother took her on an airplane to see Padre Pio. And strangely enough, this is 1968. Right before she left, she had a vision of Padre Pio, who was said to say, "Come quickly." And so she jumped on the airplane, got to Italy, and she met Padre Pio. A meeting was arranged, and Padre Pio blessed the child, and then they went back home, back to the United States, and she went back to the doctor. And the doctor looked at her, and I guess they did whatever kind of tests or x-rays, and it turns out that the bladder grew back. A rudimentary bladder grew back in the place of the one that was removed. And I've spoken to Vera Calandra now. She's grown up, of course, from being born in the 1960s, and she helps run that National Center, Padre Pio, that you referenced yourself. And I interviewed her for the Miracles of Padre Pio program that I did for EWTN. And she's a healthy woman now, and she helps run that incredible shrine there. And I think the skeptics who hear this, they say, "Oh yeah, that whatever doctor said he removed the bladder, he must have removed something else. He must have been some kind of hack. He didn't know what he was doing, or they couldn't figure out that a new bladder was there. They didn't have the technology." The doctor who did the surgery was C. Everett Koop, the future Surgeon General of the United States. So I don't know. It's an insane miracle. I mean, bladders don't grow back. We all know that. And what's so interesting is this happened in 1968, and that vision received by the mother of Vera Calandra was, "Come quickly." It's because when they returned to the United States from that blessing, Padre Pio died. So they caught him right before he died, and that miracle happened because they saw him. So I don't know. Padre Pio's one of my favorite modern miracle working saint, but I don't know. I just love that story. It's insane. You can't get around it. It's pretty incredible.
So this is mercifully in high definition. So listeners can see that there are tears in my eyes, Michael, because I have also interviewed Vera on this program, okay, which I think is amazing. You didn't know this when you told me this story, because after I got that email, I wrote back to Nick Gaboni, who is the CEO of the Padre Pio Center.
I was going to say, was that Nick who wrote you? Yeah.
It was, and we've kept in touch since then. And I said, "Hey, why don't you come on the show and tell your story?" He goes, "Well, I can come on the show. I'm going to bring my Vera as well." And so, 3 years ago, I think probably next week, I had Nick and Vera on the show to tell that story, which I think is amazing. That of all the stories you could have told, Padre Pio maybe giving us both a little rib in the elbow in the ribs or something here. I think that's how he works in my life, at least. I don't know about you. Right? To tell that story, right? That's full circle for me.
Yeah, it's a good one. I there's lots of miracle stories to talk about, but yeah, that's an incredible one.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, Padre Pio giving us a little bit of a jab there, as he does. I love that. I love that, and I love the patron of this podcast, at least certainly, if not my my existence. Padre Pio is a favorite of mine. I love that. That's awesome, Michael. Okay, one more thing, and it's your favorite, then maybe Marian apparition. I mean, because again, Padre Pio, the saints, Mary, these are the things that require a paradigm shift for many listeners who aren't already Catholic. Because why would God allow these things to happen? Why would God answer the prayers of a saint, right? Why would he allow that amazing miracle to happen? Why is Mary so important if she is, as I believe as a Protestant, the person who Christ was born from, but that was the end of her role, right? That's how we saw her, which again, that's silly in hindsight. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's how we saw her, right? But so she must be more if God is she's appearing places, right? These are those paradigm shifting kind of faith earthquake making moments. So what's your favorite version of that?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think that unfortunately it's the obvious one. Our Lady of Guadalupe is my favorite because of a conversion story in my own family. And, I've been to Mexico myself, and I've seen that tilma, and I've been able to interview the bishop there, and Monsignor Chavez, the postulator for Juan Diego. If people haven't seen my show, Guadalupe Mysteries on EWTN, you can go to EWTN RC to see that. That's probably one of my favorite projects that we've ever worked on, and got to interview all the scientists who have examined the tilma and some of the remarkable qualities of the tilma. They're kind of mind blowing. So I don't know. The Guadalupe story is really great. Just Juan Diego, the guy who doesn't want to be involved, but he gets tapped on the shoulder like we all do in some ways by God, right? To step up and evangelize. So I think I love that. And then the everlasting image, that image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, not made from human hands. They don't know how it was made, all the remarkable characteristics that have been found in that tilma. And then the conversion of so many people. So many converts even today. You have, 9 million Aztecs in the decade after Guadalupe events in 1531, according to the historian Modo Linea. So, and then there's still people today who have a devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe all throughout Mexico and the world, including myself. So yeah, that's always my favorite. And, I think that people need to get to know Our Lady of Good Help here in Champion, Wisconsin, in the United States. I think that's important. And, one of my favorite aspects of my show, I'm plugging my show again, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, on Saturdays. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Each week we do a different miracle story from around the world, and a lot of those are Marian miracle stories. And I pick the most famous, mysteries and marvels in history, as I like to say. And the constant feedback I get are from, faithful Catholics who watch the show. They said, I never heard of that one before. I never heard of Borang and Bonneau and Pont-Main and any of the others, many that we've done. I think we've done 30 episodes so far. And people always write in and they say, how come I never heard this story of this approved Marian apparition? And I don't know if you've caught any of the episodes, but one of the aspects I'm so proud of are the recreations in those episodes. I think that, we all have in our mind's eye, or maybe we've seen an old drawing in an old book of what it might look like to see a vision of the Virgin Mary. But I work with such a talented team, and they really make these come to life in a really beautiful way. And I put them up against anything you see in Hollywood. I think my team is so good, and they really help you visualize what a vision of Mary might look like. And so I encourage people to check that out, because there are some really cool stories about visions of Mary.
Absolutely. All your stuff is amazing, Michael. I've said before at the start of the show, I've loved your stuff for a long, long time. These are the kind of things that just draw people in, and questions I had like this, that how do I explain this? Digging deeper into like the archives on sites like yours just further confused me. And so led me eventually to ask the right questions and become Catholic. And so I hope this will serve as a jumping point for, first of all, to encourage faithful Catholics to, to love and dig deeper in their faith, but those who are on the outside to kind of pause and go, okay, well, how do I explain these things? Where do you want to point listeners, viewers towards you mentioned your amazing show. It is fantastic, effects included, like the recreations are awesome. It's awesome stuff. And I love that kind of thing. I love these amazing miracle stories. So I'm a sucker for everything that you do, but where else do you want to point people towards to find and follow the stuff that you're doing, Michael?
Yeah, so I think that you can find everything on miraclehunter.com if that's your one stop. If you like social media, I've been posting a lot on Instagram these days, and it's been really exploding for me. So I encourage people to find me at miracle.hunter on Instagram. And then if you like I say, I love interviewing these people who have had miracles, and it sounds like you enjoy that as well. So on my radio show, people can go on 7 p.m. Eastern time on Saturdays. And then also my shows on Saturday as well, Explore with the Miracle Hunter. But miraclehunter.com is the place to find all the details and all that stuff. But I really appreciate you having me on tonight. And it's always good to talk to somebody who likes talking about miracles.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, personally and professionally, this has been an absolute treat for me. I hope listeners also love this, and I'm sure they will. And I want to say, Michael, God bless you and the fantastic work you're doing for the church. And thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you.